Hey guys, tonight we're travelling back to a time when just being a little different, or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, could turn your world upside down. You're lying in bed, maybe half awake, but instead of soft sheets and a cosy duvet, you feel the scratchy weight of a straw mattress. The room is chilly, shadows flickering on the plastered walls from a single tallow candle, and outside your window, you hear a distant dog barking at nothing. The wind rustles the thatch above your head, and the night seems deeper, somehow more menacing than usual. That's when you notice it's a little too quiet. People in your tiny medieval village are superstitious at the best of times, but lately there's a charge in the air, a tension that makes your skin prickle. Someone's been whispering about omens, odd goings-on, and here's the kicker, witches. Actual, honest-to-goodness witches. It's enough to make you wish you'd just kept your head down and never learned how to make a decent loaf of bread, let alone the herbal tea your grandmother taught you. You probably won't survive this. Not that you'd want to if the neighbours get their way. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing just how many different beds we're all settling into for these strange, sleepy stories. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink in the darkness, pulling your blanket a little tighter around your shoulders. The wind outside moans low, and you tell yourself it's just the old barn creaking, but you can't shake the sense that something's coming for you. You hear footsteps, your own heart's beat, or maybe your neighbour, old Mags, making her way to the well. Either way, you're hyper-aware that in this world, suspicion is the real currency, and nobody can afford to seem too strange, too clever, or, worst of all, too unlucky. That's the thing about the so-called witching hour. It isn't just a bit of folklore to spook kids or an excuse for a creepy bedtime story. In medieval and early modern Europe, people genuinely believed there was a window each night, usually sometime between midnight and 3 in the morning, when the veil between this world and the next got thin. Anything bad that happened, milk souring, cows miscarrying, a child waking up with a fever, was quickly blamed on supernatural mischief. And if you happened to be awake during these hours, or worse, if someone sees you outside, you've basically signed up for a starring role in the next village panic. Tonight though, the trouble isn't just the weather or the livestock. It's the kind of night when your name might be whispered behind closed doors, when every creak on the floorboard sounds like fate knocking. You think about your week. You traded eggs with the baker's wife, gave a neighbour a headache remedy, and because you're generous, shared a little advice on how to grow better carrots. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Well, in a world that's always looking for a scapegoat, ordinary can be a moving target. It's worth remembering. This is a time when most people believe the world is full of spirits, curses, and hidden magic. It isn't just village gossip. The laws back it up. In the 15th and 16th centuries, so-called witchcraft statutes start popping up all across Europe. England passes one in 1542, for example, making it a capital offence to conjure, enchant, bewitch, or cause any hurt or death to any person. Sounds specific, right? But in practice, these laws were about as clear as mud. Historians still argue whether lawmakers were trying to root out paganism or just giving townsfolk another way to handle grudges. And then there are the little things that get you in trouble. Maybe you live alone, or your cat has a habit of hissing at strangers, or you once accidentally cured someone's headache with a hot compress instead of a prayer. The mainstream historical fact here. In many European villages, most accused witches were women, often older, often poor, and often, heartbreakingly, just a bit too outspoken for their own good. Sometimes, just being a widow or having no children to vouch for your innocence was enough to put you on the list. But here's your quirky tidbit. In Iceland, most of those accused of witchcraft were actually men. The accusations there were tangled up in magical staves, runic spells, and old Viking legends. So if you think only wise women needed to worry, think again. Historians still debate whether that gender split was about cultural values or just random chance. Maybe in some places, magic was seen as men's business, while in others, it was a woman's burden. Back to your candlelit room. You can't sleep. It's not just the howling wind or your rattling nerves, it's the feeling that you're being watched, even though nobody in your right mind would be out on a night like this. Maybe you try to distract yourself with your daily chores in your mind. Tomorrow you'll need to fetch water, patch the roof, and try to keep the hens from fighting. It's all so ordinary, but every small failure, a cracked egg, a broken pot, could be interpreted as a sign that you're in league with dark forces. Maybe you're thinking, well, at least my friends know me, they'd never suspect me. But that's the cruel magic of mass hysteria. It only takes one person, one sideways look, one bad harvest, and suddenly everyone's pointing fingers to save themselves. You remember that last winter a girl named Elsie got sick and died. Her mother, in her grief, muttered something about a curse. Within a week, people started giving you sideways glances because your herbs smelled funny, and you'd once comforted Elsie after a nightmare. You laugh it off, or try to. You tell yourself, they wouldn't accuse me, I'm helpful, I'm normal. But in the back of your mind, a darker thought nags. Normalcy is a luxury for those who don't stand out. In the 1600s, the infamous Matthew Hopkins, England's self-proclaimed witch-finder general, travelled from town to town, stirring up panic wherever he went. He discovered witches by the dozens, sometimes using methods as scientific as, she looks suspicious. Historians still can't agree if he truly believed his own hype or just enjoyed the power and profit. Let's not forget the fringe ideas. Some people genuinely believed you could turn yourself invisible, fly on broomsticks, or talk to your dead relatives just by drawing a chalk circle and whispering the right words. Sure, it sounds absurd now, but in a world where nobody can explain lightning, eclipses, or why you wake up with a sore neck, magic feels just as reasonable as blaming the cat. The thing is, you're not even sure what would count as evidence against you. Maybe you're unlucky enough to have a wart on your hand, or a birthmark in the wrong place, or a black chicken that lays odd-shaped eggs. In some parts of Germany, any of these could be seen as the witch's mark, supposed proof of your pact with the devil. Historians still debate whether people genuinely believed in these signs, or just used them as convenient excuses. You hear another noise outside, a branch scraping the wall, or perhaps something more sinister. Your heart thuds. Should you hide your stash of dried herbs, burn your grandmother's old book of prayers, or would that just make you look even more suspicious if someone comes looking? Suddenly, you wish you'd paid a little more attention to that time the travelling friar warned everyone to beware the signs of evil among you. If you think this couldn't happen to you, remember, in some places just having a bad dream and telling your neighbour about it was enough to get tongues wagging. And once suspicion takes root, it spreads like wildfire. People start recalling every odd thing you've ever said or done, like that time you joked about making rain, or the moment you sneezed right before the smith's horse threw a shoe. Coincidence? Not in this village. You try to calm yourself. Maybe tomorrow, the tension will break and things will go back to normal. Maybe the cows will stop dying, the bread will rise, and people will forget all about witches. Or maybe, just maybe, tomorrow's the day you hear footsteps on your doorstep, the magistrate's men ready to ask, "What were you doing at the well last night?" You turn over trying to sleep, hoping your worries are just dreams. But somewhere out in the night, a dog howls again, and you can't shake the feeling that your nightmare is just beginning. You wake the next morning with a pounding head, your nerves still buzzing from the long sleepless night. It doesn't help that as soon as you step outside, the air itself seems charged. Thicker, pricklier. There's a kind of hush over the village, broken only by the shuffling of tired feet and the distant clatter of a wooden bucket being dropped down the well. You nod at old Martha as she limps by, her mouth pulled tight as a knotted string. She doesn't nod back. You tell yourself it's nothing, but deep down you know. Something has shifted. Gossip in this place is a living, breathing thing, more contagious than the plague, and just as deadly if you're on the wrong end of it. Someone once said that the only thing faster than the wind is a juicy rumour, and nowhere is that truer than in a medieval village. Homes are pressed together so tightly you could pass a loaf of bread from window to window without stepping outside. People gather at the well, the bakehouse, the muddy lane that doubles as a marketplace, and every single meeting is an opportunity for words to tumble out, to twist and transform as they bounce from ear to ear. You wish you had the power to turn invisible, but here, there's always someone watching, always someone listening. This morning, the rumours are unmistakable. They slither through the streets, coil around the corners, and slide beneath doors. You catch fragments as you walk, odd things in the night, cats howling at the moon, herbs that shouldn't grow so well in rocky soil. It doesn't take much for a harmless story to turn dark, especially if a cow dies or a child wakes up feverish. Suddenly, a cold draft blows through every conversation. Your name is mentioned a little too softly or not at all. One thing historians agree on: most people in small towns genuinely believed in the power of spoken words. A whispered curse could spoil butter. A compliment could jinx your harvest. The village was a web, and you, if you're unlucky, have found yourself tangled right in the middle of it. You find yourself replaying everything you've done in the past week. Did you smile too wide at the butcher's wife? Did you turn away too quickly from the baker's son? Did you, heaven forbid, forget to cross yourself before leaving the house? The smallest slip, the tiniest oversight, can feed the beast of gossip. And you can't help but wonder, was there ever really any way to avoid suspicion? That's the nightmare of paranoia. Once it's loose, nobody's immune. Even your so-called friends look at you sideways, as if a single odd word or a misplaced grin could be the missing clue they need to save themselves. Everyone's anxious to find someone else to blame for the run of bad luck that's crept through the town. And who better than someone who's always been a little different? Here's your mainstream historical fact. Studies of witch panics across Europe show that accusations often started with small, local feuds, jealousies over land, arguments about inheritance, spats over borrowed tools. In many cases, people used witchcraft charges to settle old scores, get rid of rivals, or explain the unexplainable. If your neighbour's cow dropped dead after you borrowed her butter churn, well, that's hardly a coincidence, is it? Now for the quirky tidbit. Some towns hired professional town gossipers. Yes, really. Their official job was to listen, to report, and sometimes to spread information, or misinformation, as a way to control the community. It's like a medieval neighbourhood watch with less walking and more whispering. In places like rural Scotland, common talk was admissible in court, meaning that enough rumour, if repeated often, could count as evidence. Historians still argue whether these jobs kept peace or just made life more dangerous for outsiders. You shuffle through your day, feeling the weight of 100 glances pressing down on you. Every smile is stiff, every greeting tinged with unease. The market seems quieter than usual. You catch your friend Agnes selling onions at her stall. She gives you a look, quick and nervous, as if to say, "I'm sorry, but I have my own family to think about." Maybe she heard something, or maybe she's just afraid to be seen talking to you. The worst part? You're not even sure what you're accused of, at least not yet. The story is still growing, still gathering speed and detail like a snowball rolling down a hill. By noon, it will have picked up enough mud to blot out anything true. One neighbour says she saw your cat prowling the churchyard at midnight. Another swears you never get sick, not even during last winter's fever. The blacksmith remembers that time you predicted a rainstorm, and the miller's wife claims she saw you digging in the garden for something unnatural. Each scrap is meaningless on its own, but woven together, they become a net. It's a bit like that old children's game, Whisper Down the Lane. You say, "I'm feeling tired," and by the time the message comes back, you're making people sick. Nobody wants to be the next target, so everyone is quick to point away from themselves. One day you're sharing a mug of ale, the next you're the topic everyone's too nervous to mention by name. You hear a joke from a passing labourer, "Better a witch than a wife who can't bake bread." Everyone laughs a little too loudly. You force a smile, but your stomach churns. In truth, nobody's laughing. There's fear behind every giggle, every side-eye glance. Maybe they'll come for you, but if not, it could be them. It's almost comforting in a dark way to have a scapegoat. Scholars still debate how much people actually believed the rumours versus how much they simply needed a target. Was it mass hysteria, religious fear, or just garden variety neighbourly spite? Maybe it was all three, and maybe, as some historians suggest, there's power in joining the crowd. When everyone else is whispering your name, it's safer to join in than to protest. By midday, you've lost count of how many times you catch people staring at you. You feel the village closing in around you, tighter and tighter, as if the walls of your world are shrinking. Even the chickens seem to cluck a little more suspiciously. You keep your head down, focus on your work, try not to give anyone reason to talk, but that, of course, is just another thing to talk about. She's so quiet lately. What's she hiding? You pass the well, hear two women murmuring. The words are hushed, but you catch a phrase. Unnatural. Night. Her window is open. You want to shout it was hot, but you know better. Anything you say can and will be twisted. You remember years ago a woman named Hilda was accused because she kept bees. Witches' bees, they said. Look how her honey never spoils. Hilda left the village in tears. You never saw her again. At the centre of all this is the fear that anyone could be next. A bad harvest, a streak of illness, a thunderstorm. Any misfortune is fertile ground for gossip. You recall the time last spring when a fox raided the hen house. No one could catch it. The following day, the old man who lived at the edge of the woods was found beaten, accused of sending the fox with witchcraft. Was he guilty? Did anyone really care? Historians still argue whether villagers truly believed in witches, or if the idea was just a tool, a way to explain what they didn't understand, or to enforce conformity in a world where standing out could be fatal. Some say the real magic was the power of fear to make people turn against their own. You try to shake off the dread, but it clings like mud to your boots. You see your reflection in a window, pale, tense, a little wild-eyed. You hardly recognize yourself. You used to laugh at these stories, think they happened to other people in other places, but now you know better. By sunset, the village feels smaller, meaner. Even the air seems charged, as if the whole place is holding its breath. You retreat to your house, bolting the door behind you, listening to the faint, distant echo of voices, always talking, never saying your name aloud, but never quite letting you go. Before you blow out your candle, you think back on the day. You did nothing wrong, but you also know, in a place where paranoia rules, innocence is the thinnest of shields. The night is falling again, and with it, the darkness inside the hearts of your neighbours grows just a little deeper. You crawl into bed, trying to banish the thoughts, to pretend you're safe. But you can still hear the gossip circling outside like wolves. One day, maybe, you'll wake up and find the rumours have moved on. Or maybe tomorrow they'll come for you. And as you drift into uneasy sleep, one last thought stirs. In a world this small, sometimes just surviving the night feels like a miracle. Or, as the villagers might say, maybe even a little bit of witchcraft. You rise the next day hoping the air will have cleared, that perhaps all the talk and tension was just a bad dream conjured by a restless night. But the world outside your door hasn't softened, it's sharpened, every glance now more calculating, every conversation quieter as you approach. There's a tightness in your chest as you walk through the morning mist, clutching your basket of herbs you've always gathered as your mother did before you, but which suddenly feel like contraband. At the edge of the village, beside the old yew tree, you spot Thomas. Everyone calls him Odd Tom. He's poking at the earth with a stick, speaking in a sing-song mumble to a crow perched on his shoulder. Once you might have smiled and nodded, maybe tossed him a stale bit of bread. Today you keep your eyes low and your distance wide, because everyone knows what happens to the odd ones. In every village there's always that one neighbour, maybe two if the moon is right. They're the ones with curious habits, collecting bones, talking to animals, planting wildflowers in strange patterns along the hedges. Sometimes it's just being left-handed or stuttering, or having hair the colour of ripe pumpkins. You know all too well that you're one mishap away from joining Tom at the bottom of the village's most likely to be a witch list. Historians note that left-handedness in particular has long been considered unlucky, a relic of ancient superstition. Sinister literally means left in Latin. So if you stir your soup the wrong way, people start watching, whispering and making the sign of the cross when they think you aren't looking. For you, it's just another reminder that being a little different is dangerous currency here. You remember a time when differences were merely quirks before fear took hold like creeping ivy. There's old Nan, who hums to herself and paints dots on her doors. Little Robbie, who counts the crows as they fly overhead and swears he can speak to dogs. These people were once just part of the scenery. Colourful, yes, but harmless. Now, even a limp or a lisp can turn into evidence. Historians still argue whether suspicion grew from jealousy, simple misunderstanding, or the need to explain bad luck. Maybe all three. You walk past Widow Emmett's cottage. She's always been odd, never married, keeps 3 black cats, and once survived a fever that killed half her family. Children say her cats talk at midnight. The adults shake their heads, but you notice how nobody visits her anymore. She's faded into the background, almost as if by collective agreement. There's an uneasy feeling when you remember how quickly fortune can turn. Last autumn, Old Nan's roof caught fire and no one offered to help. Instead, people muttered about judgment and bad spirits. When she came to your door for a bucket of water, you hesitated, just for a heartbeat. But the hesitation stayed with you. Even the kindest hearts freeze in a cold wind. Quirky detail of the day, in some European towns it was believed that witches could turn themselves into animals, often cats, but sometimes hares, owls, or even toads. If you saw a creature acting oddly, well, you could never be sure. There's a story from a village in France about a man who shot at a hare stealing his cabbages. The next morning, the local odd woman was found limping, and wouldn't you know it, her house smelled suspiciously of cabbage stew. The hare apparently got the last laugh. You pause by the stream, washing your hands, letting the cold water run over your fingers. You think about the petty resentments that build in a place like this. The borrowed cup never returned, the chicken that disappeared, the sick cow. Every grudge is a seed, and here the soil is rich for planting. Historians still debate. Was it real belief in dark magic that started the fire? Or just the excuse everyone needed to settle the old scores that fester in a small world? You watch as a group of children gather sticks in the field, their laughter echoing. One of them, Mary, glances at you and then whispers to her friend. You catch the words witch's eye before she turns away. It stings. You remember giving Mary a sweet biscuit last week when she tripped outside your door. Now she won't meet your gaze. You hear a rooster crow, late as always. You think of Tom, the weird neighbour, still out there speaking to his crow. You wonder if he knows how precarious his place in this world is. Perhaps he's too odd to notice, or perhaps he's learned that by leaning into his strangeness, he's safer than those who try to hide it. You wonder what would happen if you simply embraced your own quirks, but that's a risk you're not ready to take. There's a deeper fear that simmers beneath all the gossip, the sense that difference in any form must be rooted out for the good of the village. In the past, some towns held annual scapegoat rituals, driving out an animal or even a person to symbolically remove bad luck. Historians argue whether these traditions faded because of changing beliefs or just because people learned subtler ways to pick their victims. The day drags on. You do your best to look normal, whatever that means now. You join the others at the well, laugh at their jokes, force yourself to stay in step. But inside, you're counting every word, every gesture, terrified of standing out. You're painfully aware that something as simple as humming a tune or tripping over your own feet could be twisted into proof that you're not like everyone else. You watch as Widow Emmett passes by, her cats winding around her ankles. Someone mutters, "Devil's familiars," just loud enough for you to hear. The words hang in the air, poisonous and heavy. You notice the way the others avoid her, how the circle tightens against her. You know that if things get worse, she'll be the first to fall. The market is quieter now. The odd ones are fewer, keeping to the shadows. You hear stories from other villages about men accused for knowing too much about plants, women denounced for singing to the moon, children banished for having witches' hair. There's no safe haven for the different here. You return home, your heart aching with fear and a strange, desperate longing to belong. You think of your grandmother, who used to say, "Better to be a little strange than a little cruel." You wonder if that's true in a world that rewards cruelty with survival. There's a joke that floats around on darker days. What do you call the person who talks to animals? A druid if you're rich, a witch if you're poor. You force a laugh, but the truth is bitter. There's a price for standing out, and it's paid in whispers and stares. As dusk falls, you light a candle and try to calm yourself. You hear Tom outside, still talking to his crow. His voice is soft, almost musical. You wonder what it would be like to be fearless, to simply be yourself without worrying about the cost. But here, in this village, fear is the true witch, and it haunts everyone, odd or ordinary. You sit by the window watching the shadows lengthen. You remember the stories, how witches were said to dance in the moonlight, to call storms, to turn milk sour with a glance. You remember that these stories were once just tales told to make sense of the unknown. Now they're weapons, used to keep everyone in line. You try to imagine a future where difference is safe, where the weird ones are cherished for their gifts. But it's hard to hold on to hope when every day brings a new reminder that standing out is dangerous. You blow out your candle and climb into bed, your thoughts tangled like the roots of the old yew tree. You tell yourself that tomorrow will be better, that maybe the fear will pass. But deep down, you know that as long as there's someone left to blame, the nightmare will go on. Outside, the moon rises, casting silver shadows across the village. Somewhere, a crow caws, a lonely sound in the darkness. You close your eyes and try to sleep, knowing that when you wake, the world will still be watching, still waiting for someone to make the wrong move. And as you drift off, you wonder, will it be you, or Tom, or Widow Emmett who falls next? In this place, being odd isn't just dangerous, it's a living nightmare, one you can't wake from. It starts with a knock, loud, deliberate, the kind that rips you out of any hope of peace. Your heart stutters, then slams against your ribs. The morning sun slants through the warped glass of your window, and in that golden light you see the dust dancing, lazy, unbothered, unlike the rest of the village. The knock comes again, louder. No one ever visits this early unless they have news, and lately all the news seems to be bad. You try to steady your hands, but your fingers tremble as you open the door. 3 men stand there. You know them all. It's never strangers who come, always people whose faces you know as well as your own. The baker's cousin with his thick beard and shifty eyes. The magistrate's clerk, too thin for his robe, eyes darting. And at their centre, the magistrate himself, Master Ellis, tall, stiff, with a voice so sharp you could cut cheese with it. There's no kindness in their greetings, just a grim nod, the kind that says, "We wish we didn't have to do this, but aren't you glad it's not us?" They deliver the summons in stilted words, their eyes never meeting yours for long. You are required to appear before the magistrate's bench at noon by order of the town council. The words taste of ashes. You know what they're about, even if no one says it out loud. Everyone does. You manage to murmur, "Yes, sirs," and close the door softly, as if slamming it might shatter the fragile line between suspicion and accusation. For a moment, you just stand there, staring at your own reflection in the darkened glass, a face pale with fear, eyes wide and wild. There's no guidebook for what to do when the law comes for you. No one writes songs about surviving a witch accusation. You have some time before noon, but it moves strangely, both dragging and racing. You tidy your small home as if that will somehow cleanse you of whatever stain has settled on your name. You smooth the blanket, brush the hearth, hide the herbs you once shared so freely. Every simple action feels suddenly incriminating. Why is your broom so worn? Why are there so many jars? Should you pour out the leftover tea, or will that look like you're hiding poison? You catch yourself laughing, soft, panicked. In a place ruled by fear, even orderliness can look like evidence. As you ready yourself, you think about power, how it works, who really holds it. Historians still argue about these moments. Was it the magistrate's justice, the church's word, or the will of the people that truly ruled a village like this? Some say the magistrate was just a figurehead, enforcing whatever the church or the crowd demanded. Others insist that the local council was the true heart of authority, wielding the law as both sword and shield. You suppose it doesn't really matter. Today, power wears a face you recognise, and it's come knocking on your door. On your way to the council house, the whole village seems to hold its breath. Every window creaks open just a little, curtains flutter as people peer out. Some faces you know, some you don't, most wearing the same mix of curiosity, fear and relief. Relief, because today isn't their turn. You keep your head high, but inside you're shrinking. Every step feels like walking a tightrope across a chasm. You hear whispers, some hasty, some deliberate. There she goes. I always wondered. Didn't she once cure a fever with just a touch? You wish you could vanish, but you know better than to run. In a world this small, there's nowhere to go. The council house stands at the centre of the village, a squat timbered building with smoke rising from its crooked chimney. It smells of old ink, sour sweat and fear. The door groans as you push it open. Inside, the magistrate's bench waits, flanked by two smaller chairs. The clerk sits scribbling with a quill, and the baker's cousin stands with his arms folded. At the back, a handful of villagers have already gathered. Everyone wants to see what happens when someone's accused, as long as it isn't them. You take the seat offered to you, a rough stool with splinters that catch at your skirt. Your knees knock together, but you press them still. The magistrate straightens, clearing his throat, and the room quiets as if on command. He reads your name from a sheet of parchment, his voice echoing in the cramped room. You're here to answer certain questions regarding strange occurrences and the welfare of this village. He lists them: sick animals, spoiled milk, sleepless nights. No one says witchcraft yet, but the word hangs in the air like smoke. You answer the questions as calmly as you can. No, I haven't seen anything odd. Yes, I sometimes make tea for headaches. No, I don't know why the miller's cow won't give milk. Each answer sounds both too simple and too rehearsed. You're not sure what will help or harm you, so you choose honesty, for lack of a better weapon. Mainstream historical fact. Most early witch trials didn't begin with a dramatic scene or a formal accusation, but with a series of small, seemingly innocent questions. Authorities believed that a true witch would betray themselves by their words, so you're supposed to trip up, reveal your guilt by accident. It's a little like playing chess with someone who moves the pieces while you're not looking. The magistrate leans forward, voice lowering. It has been brought to my attention, he says, that you were seen near the church well after dark. What business had you there? The room leans in, waiting for you to falter. You explain. Fetching water for a neighbour, a simple kindness. But now it sounds weak, even to you. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some towns believed that wells, crossroads or old trees were places of hidden power, portals where witches gathered or spirits lingered. To be seen near one at the wrong hour was, in itself, suspicious. In your case, you realise with a cold flush that the well is also where the baker's wife lost her necklace last week. You didn't even know. Historians still argue if these places were genuinely feared, or just handy scapegoats when something went missing. The questions continue. So many, so fast you start to lose track. Why do you live alone? Who taught you to make salves? Have you ever cursed someone in anger? You want to shout, doesn't everyone get angry sometimes? But you keep your voice steady. You sense in their eyes the hunger for a confession, or at least for a story to tell tonight over oil and stew. You notice the magistrate glancing toward the back of the room, where the priest stands with arms folded. The church is present, silent, but powerful. Sometimes you know, the priest and the magistrate work together. Other times they jostle for authority. In some places the church led the hunt for witches. In others, it was the secular courts. Historians still can't agree who was crueler or more eager for spectacle. The clerk records everything, scratching away with his quill, blotting the parchment now and then with a rag. Every word feels heavier for being written down, as if the act of recording it makes it true. You wonder if, somewhere in the archives, there's a story like yours, someone who managed to explain everything away, someone who walked out and returned to normal life. Or maybe the archives only remember those who didn't. You field questions for what feels like hours, but might be just 20 minutes. Sometimes, the magistrate repeats himself, as if waiting for you to slip up. Have you ever used charms to heal? Do you own a black cat? Were you present when the storm struck last week? You try to keep your answers simple, but as the questions keep coming, doubt creeps in. Are you digging yourself deeper, or are they running out of things to ask? Suddenly the door creaks and the room stills. A boy bursts in breathless. He whispers to the clerk, who nods and leans into the magistrate's ear. You see their faces tighten, a decision being made just out of your reach. The magistrate stands. We will continue this inquiry tomorrow. Until then, you're not to leave the village. He doesn't say why. He doesn't have to. Everyone in the room knows the unspoken rule. Once accused, you're never truly free. You rise from your stool, legs wobbly. The villagers part before you, some fearful, others triumphant, as if your shame is their redemption. Outside, the air is thick with whispers, and a few bold children throw pebbles at your feet as you pass. You keep your head up, refusing to run. You know, now, that the eyes of the whole world, or at least your tiny world, are watching. Historians still debate what these first hearings were meant to achieve. Were they a genuine search for truth, or simply a performance to reassure the fearful? Some argue that the process was designed to weed out the unlucky, not the guilty. You feel, in your bones, that there's no safe answer, no clear path to innocence. Back home, you bolt your door and sink into your chair. The summons sits on your table, a stark reminder that life as you knew it is over. You wonder if the men who brought it felt sorry for you, or were they just glad to have someone else in the spotlight for once? You stare at your hands, searching for answers in the lines of your palms. You remember stories your grandmother told you, of wise women brought before magistrates, of clever men who outwitted the law with riddles. But you're not clever, you're just afraid. You force yourself to eat a little bread, but it sticks in your throat. You think about what happens next. The questions, the suspicion, the waiting. You know that, in some villages, people have vanished after being summoned, sent away in the night, never to be seen again. In others, the process drags on for weeks, each day bringing a new accusation, a new piece of supposed evidence. You try to sleep, but every sound wakes you. You dream of dark corridors, endless questions, doors that never open. When dawn comes, it's with no comfort, only the certainty that this living nightmare is far from over. And as the morning breaks, you realize it doesn't matter who holds the power here, church, council, or crowd. Once suspicion has taken root, it grows wild, choking out everything else. You're alone now, on the edge of a story no one wants to hear. You think the worst part is over, that maybe the magistrate's questions are as bad as it gets, but you don't realize this is the moment when the story starts to truly twist. Because now, it isn't just the law that comes after you, it's someone's voice, a neighbour, a friend, or at least someone you thought was neither for nor against you. It's the moment a finger points, and suddenly you're not just an unlucky villager, you're the villain in someone else's tale. The next morning arrives with a brittle clarity. Sunlight slices through your window, illuminating the dust you missed when you tidied in your panic. It feels mocking, as if the world itself is showing you the little things you overlooked. You force yourself up, dress in your plainest clothes, and tie your hair with trembling hands. You want to look as ordinary as possible, no bright colours, no jewellery. Nothing that could be mistaken for a charm. The summons comes again, this time softer, almost apologetic. The clerk appears at your door, cheeks flushed and eyes averted, as if he's already ashamed of what will happen next. The council wishes to hear from you again, he says, voice barely above a whisper. Someone has come forward. You don't ask who, you don't need to. Every story needs a witness, and every nightmare, it seems, needs an author. As you walk through the village, you sense the eyes more keenly than ever. They peer from behind curtains, from cracks in doors, from the safety of numbers. No one calls your name. No one dares to speak to you directly. You're an island now, adrift on a sea of silence. When you enter the council house, the air is different, heavier, as if it's waiting to be broken. The magistrate sits at the bench, stern and severe. The clerk is beside him, pen at the ready. A few villagers cluster at the back, their faces expectant, hungry. You scan the crowd for a sign, a soft smile, a nod of support, but you find only wary gazes and lips pressed tight. Then you see her, Agnes. You're surprised, and not surprised at all. She stands at the front, her hands knotted in front of her apron, eyes wide and brimming with tears that refuse to fall. She's always been nervous, but today she's the centerpiece. Everyone leans in, waiting. The magistrate calls her forward. Tell us, Agnes, in your own words. The room holds its breath. She glances at you, quick, apologetic, like a child caught in a lie, then looks away. She starts to speak and her voice trembles. I saw her last Thursday, near the churchyard after dark. She was humming. I don't know the tune. It sounded strange. She bites her lip as if the words taste bad. I thought it was just odd. But then, the next day my son woke up with a fever, and my bread wouldn't rise, and the water was cloudy. You try to hold her gaze, but she refuses to meet your eyes. The magistrate nods solemnly, as if each word is a stone laid at your feet. He asks, Did she ever give you food or drink? Agnes nods, wiping her hands on her apron. Yes, she gave me a loaf last week, and a sprig of rosemary. For luck, she said. The room murmurs, rosemary for luck. In another time it would be a kindness. Now it's suspicion. So many witchcraft accusations began not with malice, but with misfortune and misunderstanding. A neighbour fell ill, a child cried all night, a horse threw its rider, and the mind sought patterns. The woman, or man, who happened to be nearby, who had quarrelled with the family, or who offered a charm or remedy, became the natural scapegoat. You try to remember if you did anything unusual last Thursday. You recall you were sleepless, wandering for air, your mind spinning with anxiety. You remember seeing Agnes at her window, but you thought nothing of it. Now, that moment has been rewritten into a crime. The magistrate presses on. Have you noticed anything else? Agnes hesitates. The silence grows. Then she whispers, Once, I saw her cat in my garden. It was watching me. I shooed it, but it wouldn't leave. The next day, my milk went sour. You want to laugh, or cry, or both. A cat, a loaf of bread, a song in the dark. These are the building blocks of a living nightmare. Quirky tidbit. In parts of Eastern Europe, it was believed that a witch could steal the butterluck from her neighbour's churn by walking around the house 3 times and muttering a secret phrase. If your butter didn't come together or your cream went off, there was only one explanation: someone must have worked a spell. Historians find records of people setting booby traps, like burying thorns under the churn or spitting in the milk to ward off magical theft. But not all accusers are motivated by fear. Sometimes there's something colder at work, a grudge, an old wound. Maybe Agnes remembers the day you won the village baking contest, or the time you refused to lend her a penny. Maybe she truly believes you harmed her, or maybe she's simply desperate to find a reason why her life isn't going the way she hoped. Scholars still argue how much of witch hunting was hysteria, and how much was spite, envy, or a dark sort of opportunity. And sometimes the accuser isn't a neighbour at all. Sometimes It's the professional, the witchfinder. The magistrate now nods to a new face at the back. You've never seen him before, a gaunt man in a dark coat, sharp eyes glinting like a crow's. He steps forward, clearing his throat with the gravity of a man who expects to be listened to. He introduces himself as Master Bentham, a consultant from the next county over. His accent is strange, his voice oily and practiced. Your worship, he begins. I have seen cases such as this before. The pattern is familiar, a subtle worker of mischief hiding her hand behind acts of kindness. It begins with a loaf of bread, ends with the devil's bargain. He turns to you, eyes cold and bright. Did you know, good people, that witches often mark their victims with gifts? Bread, herbs, a glance, a word. I have seen it many times. The accused fits the pattern, a solitary woman skilled with plants, present at odd hours. It is not proof in itself, but it is suggestive. You bristle, but you say nothing. You know that in this moment, logic is no match for performance. Witchfinders like Master Bentham travel from town to town, offering their expertise for a price. They bring with them stories, tales of possessed livestock, haunted wells, women who fly at midnight. Historians still debate how these careers began. Some say it was genuine belief, others say it was a convenient way to make a living off other people's fear. Bentham paces before the crowd. I have seen the signs before. Last spring in Whitchurch, a woman's cat spoke in tongues. In Little Marlow, a cow walked backwards for 3 days. Clear proof of enchantment. This one, he gestures at you, has the look. The villagers shift, uneasy. Some nod, others cross themselves. The magistrate clears his throat. We thank you for your expertise, Master Bentham. We will, of course, make our own inquiries. The hearing drags on. More villagers come forward, not with new evidence, but with stories. She looked at me strangely. She muttered when I passed. My child cried after seeing her. Each account is small, petty, and heartbreakingly human. You realise with growing horror that once the first accusation is made, the dam breaks. People remember every odd moment, every awkward exchange. It becomes a competition. Who can remember the most damning detail? Who can link their misfortune to you most convincingly? Mainstream historical fact. During the height of the European witch panics, many accusers were themselves at risk, especially women. By naming another, they shifted the spotlight away from themselves, at least for a time. Some confessions given under duress or threat included accusations against others, turning neighbour against neighbour in a desperate bid for survival. Back in the council house, the clerk writes it all down, every half-remembered slight, every rumour, every suspicion. It becomes a record, not of your actions, but of the village's fear. You're given a chance to speak, but you can barely find words. You deny harming anyone. You say you have only ever tried to help. You mention the many times you've cared for sick children, shared food, tended gardens. But now those very acts are twisted. Proof that you're hiding something, that your gifts come at a price. Quirky tidbit. In some trials, especially in France and Switzerland, witches were accused of holding secret feasts where they dined on toads, bats, and the flesh of unbaptized babies. You stifle a grim smile. You've never seen a toad that wasn't half squashed by a cartwheel, let alone roasted one for supper. The magistrate listens, but his gaze is distant. He thanks you, asks if you wish to say anything else. You shake your head, knowing it won't matter. The story has been written, and your part is clear. As you leave the council house, you see Agnes in the street, shoulders hunched. She glances at you, shame flickering across her face. For a moment you remember the years of friendship, the secrets shared, the laughter. Now, all that is ashes. You walk home, the road longer than you remember. Children skip away from your shadow. Dogs bark as you pass. You wonder if you will ever again be seen as simply yourself, and not as a monster from someone else's nightmare. Historians will later ask, did accusers believe what they said? Or did fear, envy, and self-preservation twist the truth? There is no answer, only more questions echoing down the centuries. That night, as you try to sleep, the voices come back. Agnes's trembling tale, Bentham's practiced warnings, the villagers' mutters. They swirl in your mind, drowning out hope, feeding your dread. You close your eyes, but the story continues. Because once an accusation is made, it never truly ends. You don't remember how many nights have passed since the accusation, because now the hours bleed together. Sunlight only marks the waiting, and moonlight brings no peace. You eat, if only to stay standing. You sleep, if only to keep from sobbing. But you're not truly living, you're enduring. That's what this is now, a slow test of your endurance. And soon you find out the real test begins. It starts when they come for you again, not with the knock of the clerk, but with 2 guards from the town watch, grim-faced and deliberate. They tell you it's time for formal questioning. You ask, "Wasn't that what we already did?" They don't answer. One simply motions toward the square. You're not led to the council chamber this time. This time, they take you to the cellar beneath the parish hall. You didn't even know there was a cellar. It smells of damp earth and old fire. The walls are stone, slick with moisture. A single torch lights the stairwell, flickering like the breath of something alive and watching. You step inside, and the heavy wooden door groans shut behind you. In front of you stands a long table, a bench, and, of course, the magistrate. This time, he's flanked by the priest and the witchfinder, Bentham. That sharp glint in his eye has only grown. You're seated without a word. Bentham nods to the priest, who opens a leather-bound book. "We begin the testimony portion of this inquiry," he says solemnly. "You are required to answer plainly and truthfully. Any resistance will be considered evidence of guilt. You open your mouth to speak, to ask what exactly you've done. But Bentham leans forward. We will ask the questions. This is not the slow drip of suspicion you've been enduring for days. This is the deluge. The questions come fast, overlapping, each laced with accusation. Have you ever spoken with spirits? Do you dream in colours? Has your shadow ever moved on its own? Each question is more absurd than the last, but you quickly learn that denial is suspicious, hesitation is incriminating, and protest is damning. If you say no too quickly, it's because you're hiding something. If you explain, you're overly defensive. If you stammer, they nod as if they've caught you. This is no longer a search for truth. It's a performance, a ritual. They are not asking you questions because they want to learn anything. They are asking you questions because they expect you to fall into the trap of guilt, one that's been laid before you ever walked into the room. Witch trials were often chaotic performances, blending legal procedure with public theatre. In places like Salem, England, or Würzburg, witnesses would appear not just to testify, but to entertain, telling wild tales of curses, apparitions, and midnight flights. Judges played both inquisitors and stage managers. Truth was secondary to drama. Bentham produces a list, written testimony from others. You gave Agnes spoiled bread. You whispered to the widow's child, and now he won't speak. You were seen walking in the woods, 3 nights in a row, while the stars blinked strangely overhead. He reads them aloud as if they are scripture, his voice rising in rhythm. You try to respond to each one. The bread wasn't spoiled, it was warm when I gave it. I comforted the child, nothing more. I walk when I can't sleep, not to summon spirits. But it doesn't matter. For each explanation they have another question, another twisted meaning, another strange coincidence linked to your steps. They show you the items they found in your home, a jar of ash, a length of red thread, a bundle of dried sage. To you, these are nothing, common things, practical, but in this space, under this light, they're transfigured. This is for hexing livestock, Bentham announces. That's for not magic, says the priest. This herb is used to summon demons. You want to scream, you want to laugh, but instead you answer, it's for sore throats. They don't write that down. Here's your quirky tidbit. In early modern Sweden, it was believed witches could fly to a mythical island called Blåkulla. where they held feasts with the devil himself. People testified that they had seen neighbours vanish into the clouds at night and return by dawn with soot on their boots. It became standard to check shoes for ash, hair for bristles, or to look for unexplained fatigue as evidence of otherworldly travel. Historians still argue how much of this was pure invention or drug-induced hallucination. Your hands are sweating, your knees ache. You've been sitting in this cramped, torchlit space for hours. No food, no water. They ask you if you've seen the devil. You say no. They ask if he's spoken to you. You say no. They ask if you've dreamed of him. You pause, and the room pounces. You hesitated. No, You've dreamed of him. Bentham leans forward, voice low and smooth. There's no shame, you know. We understand. Witches are often chosen. They are seduced by dreams, gifts, power, companionship. It's nothing to be ashamed of, only to be confessed. You shake your head, muttering, "There's nothing to confess." The priest closes his book with a sigh. A stubborn spirit. We will pray for her clarity. Here's where the real nightmare begins. They bring in witnesses. Some you recognize, others you don't. They stand one by one and offer memories twisted into monsters. The time you shouted at a man in the market. The time your garden flourished while others failed. The time you sang a lullaby in a strange tongue. It was just an old song your grandmother taught you. Each memory is wrapped in fear. The way your cat followed you everywhere. The bruise someone got after brushing against your coat. The time your eye twitched during a funeral. Historians still argue whether these testimonies were lies, false memories, or social contagion. Moments when fear rewrote reality, and otherwise kind people began to believe they'd seen things they hadn't. Like mass hallucinations, only quieter, more polite. The priest stands and begins to read from scripture. Passages about evil, temptation, fire, purification. The words blur together. "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," rings louder than the rest. Bentham asks if you've ever spoken a curse. You say no. He asks if you know what a curse sounds like. You say no. He asks you to repeat a phrase you've used before, something in your grandmother's language. You do. He nods sagely. "Witch. Speech," he murmurs. "Unnatural." They call this testimony, but it feels more like drowning. For every breath you take, a new wave crashes. For every truth you speak, a new lie clings to it like seaweed. And still, no one touches you. They don't need to. The questions themselves are the torture. Though physical torture wasn't used everywhere, psychological coercion was rampant. In England, sleep deprivation was common. In Germany, thumbscrews and strappado, a brutal rope-pulling device, were favoured. In Scotland, the accused were kept awake for days, watched by guards, waiting for them to slip. Scholars still argue whether confessions gained this way were believed or simply useful. As the day fades into dusk, Bentham nods to the magistrate. "We'll get no confession today. She's resisting. They always do at first." The priest touches your shoulder, gently, almost kindly. "Tomorrow we will try again." You're escorted out and placed in a small holding room. The walls are bare, no bed, no food, a single bucket in the corner. You're told to sleep. But the torch outside your door never dims and footsteps pass every hour to jolt you awake. You drift into shallow dreams, pulled back each time you doze. They say nothing, they just wait, letting time do the work. You wonder how many others sat here, how many broke, how many lied to make it stop, how many names were dragged into this pit just to make someone else's silence end. There's a numbness settling in your bones, like frost creeping beneath your skin. By the second day of testimony, your thoughts blur. The questions loop in your mind. Do you consort with spirits? Have you ever flown? What did you see in your dreams? You begin to question yourself. Did you see something? Hear something? You recall a dream from childhood, a dark figure in the woods. Was it the devil, or just a shadow? You've told that story before, laughed over it by firelight. But here, now, you don't dare mention it. Because a story is no longer just a memory, it's ammunition. You notice something odd. Each time you deny something, Bentham sighs and nods knowingly, as if your refusal is further proof. You begin to understand that there is no winning. This is a ritual, a script. You are merely the actor, and your role is to eventually break. One of the strangest moments comes when they produce a book, an actual book, bound in black leather, with faded ink and strange symbols. Bentham claims it's a grimoire, found hidden near your cottage. You've never seen it before, but when you try to explain that, the priest simply murmurs, "A guilty heart forgets its tools." You realise this is more than just fear, it's control. The performance must have a climax. The audience demands it. The magistrate's authority depends on it. Bentham's payment depends on it. The priest's prayers, the villager's whispers, the balance of the world around you. All of it has been tilted toward this, your confession. And if they can't have it from your lips, they'll carve it from the scraps of memory and mistake you've left behind. That night, you sit alone again. The bucket in the corner, the torch burning low, you speak softly to yourself, repeating your name, reminding yourself who you are. Because already you can feel them rewriting you, not as a healer or a daughter or a neighbour, but as a monster stitched together from fear and convenience. You hear the magistrate's voice in your head, the priest's, Bentham's. You are not a witch, but that doesn't matter anymore. Morning comes again, but by now daylight feels like an extension of the interrogation. It doesn't bring safety, it only means you'll be seen more clearly, judged more publicly. You're escorted from your holding room with eyes red from half-sleep and limbs aching from the cold stone floor. Your clothes hang heavy with sweat and fear, and your thoughts are so numb they feel borrowed. This morning, they say, will be different. They tell you the council has decided to pursue a physical examination. You don't quite understand what that means until you're brought to a new room, cleaner than the others, but somehow colder. Inside, the priest and Bentham stand at the ready, joined by a grim-faced midwife you recognise only vaguely. She avoids your eyes. "This is a standard inquiry," Bentham says, as if reading from a script. "You're to be examined for the devil's mark. You want to laugh or scream. You do neither. You just nod. What other option do you have?" The so-called devil's mark was a popular piece of evidence in witch trials across Europe. It was believed that witches bore some kind of physical sign where the devil had touched them. A mole, a freckle, a scar, or a birthmark. In some cases, any part of the body that didn't bleed when pricked was considered proof. They strip you down to your shift. You shiver, not just from the draft, but from the shame. You're told to raise your arms, to turn, to kneel. The midwife examines your skin with clinical precision, calling out every blemish, every mark. There's a small mole behind the left shoulder, scar on the thigh, old. Unusual freckling along the ribs. Bentham steps closer. "That one," he says, pointing to a tiny pale spot on your arm. "That's unnatural." "It's a burn," you whisper, "from the oven 3 winters ago." He nods as if you've confirmed his theory. Yes, a burn, or a branding. Quirky tidbit. In Scotland, it was believed that the devil sometimes kissed his chosen witches to seal their pact. These devil's kisses were said to leave behind a mark. In some trials, women were examined by groups of local midwives and matrons who were tasked with finding these marks and verifying their unnatural origin. Imagine your fate depending on someone else's opinion about a freckle. The priest crosses himself and whispers a prayer under his breath. The midwife's hands are cool and careful, but her silence screams louder than any accusation. After the exam, you're left alone to dress. Your body feels like it's no longer yours, just another piece of evidence, another page in the growing file being written about you, one in which every scar has a sinister footnote. They bring you next to a new room, and this one reeks of straw and sweat. A goat bleats nervously in the corner. A chicken pecks at the ground, tied to a stake by a thin length of twine. A cat, a black one of course, sits silently in a crate watching everything. Bentham waves his hand toward the animals. Familiars, he says. Witches are known to keep companions of the devil. These creatures speak to them, serve them, sometimes even suckle from them. You blink. Suckle? He nods gravely. The devil requires sustenance. He draws it through his servants. It is known. You can't stop the words. That's madness. He smiles. Denial is expected. But if any of these animals respond to you or seek you out, it will be noted. You're told to walk the perimeter of the room, to call softly to the creatures. You do. The goat ignores you. The chicken flaps and pecks at its rope. But the cat, of course, rises and stretches, pads toward you and purrs at your feet. Ah, Bentham says triumphant. Proof. It's a cat, you say. Cats like people. He leans close. Cats like witches. During the height of the European witch panics, animals were regularly used as evidence. Cats, dogs, frogs and birds were all accused of being familiars, magical creatures or spirits in animal form. The mere act of owning a pet, especially if it behaved oddly or appeared during illness or misfortune, could mark you as guilty. Later that afternoon they bring out a bundle of items, things they've taken from your cottage. One by one, they display them on a long table in the square for the townspeople to see. Bentham raises each object high, announcing its alleged purpose. This dried root? Belladonna? A known poison? It's comfrey, you say, for swelling. This black feather? A sign of flight? Witches travel on the air? It was a crow's gift. They leave them sometimes. This string of beads? Not a rosary, clearly a charm for summoning spirits. They were my mother's. But no one listens, no one cares. The crowd murmurs and nods. You see faces you know well, neighbours who once smiled at you, now squinting as if trying to spot the devil in your eyes. You feel exposed, reduced to objects and rumours, a collection of misinterpreted leftovers from a life you used to trust. One boy points and laughs. That's her spoon. She stirred my porridge. An old woman whispers to her companion, I always said she walked too light. Witches do that. Someone else mutters, did you notice her eyes? Too bright. They catch the moonlight wrong. You turn away, feeling your stomach churn. You'd rather face the dungeon again than the twisting eyes of your own village. Bentham isn't done. He unrolls a parchment. We have collected the testimonies of 12 villagers. All speak to unusual happenings. Sick animals, dreams of shadows, a sudden frost in late spring. You were present in each. You shake your head. I can't control the weather. He raises an eyebrow. But you admit the frost came after you visited the field? You can't win. Even silence would be twisted. Scholars still argue whether people genuinely believed this so-called evidence. Did they truly think a woman's glance could curdle milk? Or were they playing their part in a system built on fear and survival? Some claim the judges believed it. Others suggest they simply pretended to. You're brought to the chapel that evening for a test of piety. A strange ritual where you're made to hold a crucifix and repeat prayers. You do, perfectly. But they note that your hands shook, that you blinked too often, that your voice carried an unnatural tone. A trick of the candlelight, they say, made your shadow move oddly on the wall. Bentham calls it evidence. The priest calls it concern. You call it a broken heart. The final insult comes in the form of a test you hadn't heard of, the weighing. In some villages, witches were thought to be lighter than normal women, because they'd flown, of course, and were weighed against Bibles, or stacks of stones, or other people. Bentham assures the crowd that your results are inconclusive, but the seed is planted. People whisper about your small frame, your sharp bones. She floats when she walks, someone says. I told you. Quirky detail. In parts of Holland, it became law that women accused of witchcraft could request to be weighed on official town scales to prove their innocence. Some towns even built permanent witch weighing stations to satisfy public demand. One still exists today. It's a tourist attraction now. Ironic, considering what those scales once cost real people. You're returned to your cell at the end of the day, numb and shaking. You lie on the cold floor and whisper to yourself that it's not real. that these are just stories, misunderstandings, misread intentions, but the marks on your arms from the torchlight, the memory of the crowd's eyes, and the way that cat purred at your feet. All those things feel more real than hope. Historians still can't agree on how belief became bureaucracy, how superstition became court record, but you've lived it. You've seen how a mole becomes a mark, a cat becomes a demon, and a woman becomes a witch. And all it takes is someone looking for proof. You know what's coming now. You feel it in the air, in the way the guards no longer look at you when they bring your food, or in how the magistrate no longer pretends to ask questions but only waits for a confession. The story has gathered too much weight to stop. It has momentum now, a life of its own, and you're no longer a person. You're the ending they've decided to write. You sit in the corner of your cell, cold and brittle as the stone behind you. Your hands rest in your lap, wrists bruised from the ropes they used when you resisted yesterday, though you never really resisted. You just asked if you could speak. You weren't allowed to. They bring you upstairs again, not to the chapel, not to the council room, but to the barn behind the magistrate's hall, a place once meant for hay and livestock. Now, cleared out and quiet, it's the sort of room that echoes. Bentham is already there, wearing gloves. A few tools rest on the table beside him. A screw press, a thick rope, a pair of iron tongs. The magistrate arrives last, flanked by 2 guards. He sighs, as if this is an unfortunate formality. You're told again, "We are not here to harm you. We're here to help you remember." You want to ask how pain ever helped anyone remember the truth, but you already know the answer. It's not about remembering the truth, it's about creating one. In many European witch trials, torture was used not as punishment but as a tool to gain confessions. Though some countries, like England, officially forbade it, exceptions were often made. In Scotland, Germany, and much of Eastern Europe, torture was routine. Thumbscrews, leg crushers, and the strappado, a rope used to hoist and drop the accused, were all standard. They begin with talk, as always. The priest urges you to confess, to unburden your soul. "The devil cannot save you," he says gently, "but God may forgive." Bentham, meanwhile, makes a show of inspecting his tools. He doesn't speak directly to you. Instead, he narrates to the room, as if giving a lesson. The thumb screw is simple. You place the finger between these ridged bars, then turn gently, not too far, just enough to help the truth rise to the surface. You clench your hands in your lap. The strappado, he continues, requires a high beam. We tie the arms behind the back and hoist the body, slowly. The shoulders dislocate if raised too high, so we only do it once, maybe twice. The magistrate finally turns to you. "All we ask is for the truth. If you speak freely, there will be no need for discomfort." You whisper, "I've already told the truth." Bentham sighs, as if that's what he expected. He nods to the guards, then will help you find a better version. They tie your wrists. You feel the tension in the rope first, an ugly, steady pressure. Your arms are pulled behind your back, the knot biting your skin. You hear the creak of the pulley above you, then you rise, slowly. The pain is instant, a white flare behind your eyes. You hear a scream and realize it's yours. Your feet leave the ground, your shoulders stretch. You feel something pop. Not a full dislocation, not yet, but close. The magistrate watches with a furrowed brow. The priest looks away. Bentham steps closer. "Are you ready to speak?" You shake your head. It takes all your breath to form the motion. He nods again. This time, they drop you. Not far, just a jolt. Enough to snap your arms downward, to make your body feel like it's tearing itself apart. The pain is enormous, too big to hold all at once. You cry out again, and the sound is ugly, raw. They do it twice more. After the third drop, they lower you slowly. You crumple onto the floor, shoulders throbbing, breath ragged. One of the guards offers a flask of water. You take it with trembling hands, grateful enough to cry. Bentham crouches beside you. His voice is soft. "Do you see? The devil lies to you. He wants your silence, but you can be free of him. Just tell us what you did. Tell us when he came to you. You shake your head again. There was no devil. He clicks his tongue. Then perhaps he sent someone else, a familiar, a spirit. Tell us the name of the one who taught you the words. What words? The spell, the charm, the song, you remember? You truly don't. You truly never knew. They give you the night to reflect. You lie on the cold floor of your cell, shoulders burning, arms limp at your sides. You can't lift them to brush hair from your face. You barely manage to drink the broth they bring you. You try to sleep, but every movement is pain. The next day they skip the rope. This time, it's the screw. Bentham fastens the metal clamp to your left thumb. The cold metal is oddly comforting until he begins to turn. It's slow, methodical. Pressure first, then pain. Sharp, hot, radiating through your hand. You don't scream this time. You grit your teeth, your eyes well with tears. He stops halfway through the turn. Still nothing? I have nothing to give. He turns again. Your thumb breaks. It doesn't matter that you're not guilty. This place doesn't require guilt, only narrative. They have the setting, the supporting cast. All they need now is the climax, your confession. In the notorious Bamberg witch trials in Germany, 1626 to 1631, over 600 people were executed. Most confessed under torture. Many named others to stop the pain. Once their stories were written, the next round of suspects was already chosen. It became self-sustaining, each confession feeding the next accusation. You spend another night in pain. This time your thumb is wrapped in cloth. The wound pulses. You ask for a priest, not to confess, but just to speak. He arrives near midnight, candle in hand. He sits on the other side of the cell bars. You ask, "Do you believe I'm a witch?" He hesitates too long. "I believe," he says at last, "that fear makes devils of us all." You laugh softly. It hurts. That's not very reassuring. He leans in. "Say what they want to hear. You'll survive." You ask, "Will I?" He doesn't answer. Quirky tidbit. In parts of Italy, confessions were considered valid only if made freely. So after torturing someone into speaking, they would wait 24 hours, then ask the person to repeat the confession without force. If the victim refused, they would resume torture until they agreed. Historians call it the illusion of voluntariness. You start to wonder if survival is even possible. What would a confession buy you? A swift execution, a life in prison, a mark on your soul that never fades? Or worse, would they let you live? You hear of others who confessed and were made to walk the streets in shame. Hair shorn, cloaks branded with red crosses, forced to carry signs that read "Witch." Some were lashed in public, spat on by neighbours, shunned forever. Others were burned, Hungarian drowned. You whisper to yourself, "I am not a witch. I am not a witch." But each time your voice sounds thinner. They bring you back again, the final questioning. You're offered bread and milk. You take it with a shaking hand. Bentham sits across from you. His expression is calm. You don't have to say everything, just something. Give us a name, a dream, a word, that's all. You stare at the bread. You can't taste it. He leans closer. We already believe it. You might as well agree. You almost do, but instead you close your eyes. You say nothing. The magistrate sighs. Then we will proceed. You'll return to your cell. Not for torture this time, just to wait. The story will move forward, with or without your words. And somewhere in that silence you understand. You've already been rewritten. You're no longer you. You are her now. The witch! You wake to the sound of keys in the lock. The scrape of metal on metal has become familiar, but it still sends a jolt through your spine. You sit up slowly, your back aching, your thumb still wrapped tight, your shoulders stiff as old rope. You're not told where you're going this time, no questions, no warnings, just come. You're led not to the council chamber, not to the barn or the cellar. but toward the river. The morning air is sharp and fog curls low across the village path. Ahead, a small crowd gathers along the water's edge, whispering in tight, wind-bitten clusters. You spot familiar faces, men who once carried your water bucket, women who borrowed your herbs, even a child who once called you auntie now hides behind her mother's skirts, peering at you like you're something monstrous. At the bank of the river, the magistrate stands beside Bentham, who for once isn't holding a book or a screw. Instead, he gestures toward a large wooden contraption, a chair of sorts, attached to a long beam. It's balanced precariously on a platform that juts into the water. 2 buckets lie beside it, one filled with stones, the other with rope. You know exactly what it is before anyone speaks. The ducking stool. The ducking stool, also called the cucking stool, was used across England and parts of Europe for punishing scolds, women accused of gossip and eventually suspected witches. Victims were strapped into the seat and dunked repeatedly into rivers or ponds. Though rarely fatal by design, it was humiliating and could be dangerous, especially in cold months or for the elderly. "This is the ordeal by water," Bentham says with theatrical flair, addressing both you and the gathered villagers. "It is an ancient test. The pure element rejects corruption. If you float, it is because the devil protects you. If you sink, you are innocent, but God shall receive you." You stare at him, dry-mouthed. "And if I drown?" He shrugs. "Then your soul is saved." You almost laugh because what else is there to do? They strip you of your outer clothing down to your shift. Your arms are bound in front of you. Not too tightly. That's part of the game. You're meant to move, to struggle, to fail. A priest steps forward and marks your forehead with oil. He mutters a prayer you can't quite hear. "Do you renounce the devil?" he asks softly. "I never knew him," you answer. Bentham nods to the guards. You're lifted onto the stool. The wood is wet from the river's mist. Cold seeps through the fabric of your shift, wrapping around your bones. Rope is looped around your waist and ankles. You're told to sit still. Don't fight, don't speak. Then the lever creaks, and you are dropped. The water swallows you in an instant, muddy, cold, violent. It fills your nose, your mouth, your ears. You kick without meaning to, not to escape guilt, but to survive. The stool jerks upward again. You gasp for air. She rises too quickly. A man in the crowd shouts, "The river rejects her." They drop you again. This time, you're ready. You don't struggle. You let yourself sink. The chill steals the breath from your lungs, the light from your eyes. But someone pulls the rope. You're hauled up, coughing, sputtering, half-blind. You hear the whispers ripple like the river. "She didn't sink. She floated. She's light. I told you." Bentham raises a hand. A sign. Quirky tidbit. In parts of Eastern Europe, accused witches were sewn into sacks with rocks and tossed into rivers. If they floated, they were burned. If they sank, they were pronounced innocent after death. In some Swiss villages, ordeals included walking barefoot over red-hot ploughshares. If your feet burned, you were guilty. If they didn't, it was a miracle, and people still accused you of working with the devil. They leave you shivering on the riverbank as the crowd disperses. Some look triumphant, others guilty. A few won't meet your eyes. You're brought back to your cell wrapped in a rough wool blanket. It does nothing to stop the tremble in your jaw or the ache in your limbs. Your skin is splotched red, your fingers white. You know you've passed a test but failed the one. The priest visits you that evening. He sits outside the bars, sighing. "They say the water knows," he murmurs. You don't reply. "I'm sorry it has come to this," he adds. "So stop it." His face hardens. "I cannot stop what has begun. Not now." He leaves you alone with your thoughts and a mug of thin broth. You don't drink it. You just sit watching the liquid ripple every time your hand trembles. The next day they try again. This time, the prick test. You're led to a small chamber behind the church. Inside stands a table covered in cloth. On it, an array of needles, pins and knives glint in the candlelight. Bentham waits, holding a long, thin bodkin. The devil's mark cannot feel pain, he says, and it will not bleed. Witch prickers were paid experts who examined women and men for signs of diabolical contact. They used sharp instruments to prick moles, freckles or calluses, any place that might be numb. Some even used retractable pins that gave the illusion of piercing without drawing blood, thereby proving guilt. In Scotland, one pricker named John Kincaid made a career out of it, until he was accused himself. They examine your body again. The same cold hands, the same familiar shame. The midwife is back, her face stone set as she points out old scars and insect bites. Each one is pricked with care. You wince, bleed, until one doesn't. It's a faded spot on your ankle, an old burn. The skin is tough, long-healed. Bentham pricks it. No blood. He leans in. There. It's a scar. He pricks it again. No reaction. A mark protected by the devil. You shout, "It's a scar," but your voice rings against stone. No one moves. The magistrate nods. This confirms it. You're not sure if you scream or sob. Your throat is raw with silence either way. The priest doesn't come that night. No one does. You lie in the dark, running your fingers over the scar on your ankle. You whisper to it. You've always been with me. Why did you betray me now? You know it didn't. But your mind is fraying. Even your body, once your own, has turned against you in the eyes of the world. Scholars still debate whether people truly believed in these tests. Did they genuinely think scars were supernatural? Did they truly believe floating meant guilt? Or was it just theatre? Ritual? A sanctioned excuse for punishment? You suspect it was all of the above. Belief, control, and spectacle. Because every test is public, every failure loud, and every silence damning. The next morning, Bentham visits your cell, alone. No guards, no priest, just him. He crouches beside the bars, his voice quiet, almost gentle. You could end this. You stare at him. Say it, he continues. Say the devil came to you. Say you flew. Say you kissed him. Say anything. Give them what they want. You whisper, I never lied. And I won't start now. He sighs, rubbing his temple. You think silence is strength. But the story's already told. You're just dragging out the ending. He stands, brushing off his cloak. They want the page to turn. They'll get it, with or without you. And he leaves. You don't call after him. Because you finally understand something. The tests were never meant to prove guilt. They were meant to confirm it. You wake to the sound of bells. Not the soft morning chimes of the chapel, but the clanging iron call of judgment. Loud, grim, ceremonial. Your body, still bruised and stiff, reacts before your mind does. You sit up, already dreading what comes next, and sure enough, the door opens within minutes. 2 guards stand waiting, dressed formally now. Tunics crisp, boots shined. You're not told where you're going, but you don't need to ask. You already know. Today is for the village. They dress you, not in your own clothes, but in a thin, rough-smelling shift. Grey and coarse, cinched with a fraying rope. No shoes. Your hair is left loose, your face unwashed, your appearance carefully arranged to say, this is not one of us. You are the show. They bring you through the back alleys first, hoping to avoid the main road. But you still catch the stares from windows, the creaks of shutters opening. Children run ahead to get good spots. Adults murmur your name. They say the witch, without hesitation. The question has become a verdict, the suspicion, a sentence. The square is already full. Wooden planks form a makeshift platform in the centre. Banners flap in the breeze. The stocks, symbolic and mostly unused in peaceful years, have been dragged into place, polished as if for ceremony. Townsfolk cluster in tight knots, whispering, watching. Public shaming of accused witches was not only a punishment, it was spectacle. Trials were often open-air affairs, especially in smaller communities. Accused persons were paraded, displayed or locked in stocks for public mockery before or after formal sentencing. The line between justice and performance was, in many cases, non-existent. The magistrate appears, flanked by the priest and Bentham, each in their finery. The clerk reads your charges in a loud voice, cursing crops, consorting with spirits, disturbing the peace, raising storms by unnatural means. You try to keep your chin high, but the words burrow into your skin like splinters. You hear them call you unnatural, twisted, marked. The crowd flinches when your name is spoken, as if the syllables themselves carry weight. Then, the final part of the show begins. You are paraded. They tie your wrists with rough twine, then walk you through the square. Children toss pebbles. Someone throws an egg. It bursts against your shoulder, sticky and warm. Laughter follows. One boy jeers, "Witch! Witch! Fly away then!" You walk barefoot across cobblestones, each step stinging. You force your face into blankness. If you cry, they win. If you run, they chase you. So you walk, as if none of this touches you. A woman near the market tosses a clump of nettles into your path. Another spits at your feet. You reach the stage again. The stocks await. They push you into them, kneeling, bent forward, your head and wrists locked in place. The wood presses against your skin. Your muscles scream, and the town begins its witnessing. People come forward in turn. Some stare, others mutter prayers. A few make the sign of the cross with unnecessary flourish. They speak of your eyes, your voice, the way your garden grew too well. They remember odd dreams, sick animals, sudden gusts of wind. In 17th century France, towns would gather for witch processions, in which the accused were paraded through the streets, sometimes forced to carry symbolic items, like a broomstick, a black candle, or a bundle of herbs, meant to represent their alleged sins. These events blurred the line between religious rite and carnival. One man throws a turnip. It hits your side with a dull thud. The crowd howls. A woman mutters that her baby didn't sleep after seeing you. A farmer insists his cows won't graze in your direction. A child claims you looked at the moon and made it flicker. They take turns like dancers in a ritual. Everyone has a story. Everyone wants a part. Because if they are watching you, they are not being watched. If you are guilty, then they are safe. Modern historians still argue whether these spectacles were meant to terrify the public into obedience or to entertain them. Some believe they were designed to reaffirm social order, to show what happens to those who step outside the lines. Others believe it was something darker, a release valve, a sanctioned cruelty to distract from the daily misery of medieval life. As you kneel in the stocks, you start to believe it's both. The worst part isn't the shame, it's the silence between the jeers, the pause where you catch someone's eye and see something unexpected. Doubt. Not everyone hates you, not everyone believes, but no one speaks, because no one wants to be next. You spot Agnes in the crowd. Her face is pale, her hands twisted in her apron. She looks at you as if she might cry. You think, now she'll speak. Now she'll tell them she was afraid, not certain. But she doesn't. She turns away, and the show continues. Bentham gives a short speech about sin and temptation and the devil's cunning. He warns the villagers not to fall prey to sympathy. The devil wears familiar faces, he says, looking at you. He speaks in soft voices. He offers kindness with poison inside. You want to laugh, or shout, or disappear, but you kneel, because there is no other choice. You remain there for hours. The sun creeps across the square. Your knees go numb, your arms tingle with pins and needles. Flies buzz. Sweat soaks the back of your neck. You long to move, to stretch, to be, but you're a thing now. A caution, a symbol. Eventually they release you. You collapse to the ground, your legs barely working. A guard hauls you to your feet. No kindness, just efficiency. You're marched back to your cell, sore and silent. You lie on the floor that night, staring at the ceiling. You whisper the names of every child you ever helped, every wound you ever cleaned, every loaf you baked, every song you sang. You repeat them like a prayer, like proof, because tomorrow they may burn you, but tonight you remember. You were kind, you were real, you were not a witch. You thought the worst of it would happen to you alone, that your body, your name, your mind would bear the weight of accusation. But now, as you lie in your cell, cold and bruised, it dawns on you. The punishment stretches far beyond the person in chains. You think of your sister. You think of your late husband's brother, the children who once helped you carry wood, the neighbours who once shared bread across your threshold. Each of them now carries the burden of being associated with you. It begins subtly. The knock that doesn't come, the basket that's no longer returned, the eyes that drop away. Even those who once defended you now do so with silence. Because to stand too close is to risk being swept up by the same tide. In many witch trials across Europe, relatives of the accused were tainted by proximity. Spouses, children, siblings, even distant cousins could face social ostracism, financial ruin, or be accused themselves. In some regions, entire families were purged based on one allegation. A boy is brought to your cell one morning. You don't recognize him immediately. He's taller, thinner, his eyes hollow, and then he speaks, and your heart breaks. "Auntie," he says, "it's Peter, your sister's son. He's just 12, but his voice is hoarse from crying." He tells you they came to the house, that the villagers threw stones at the door, that someone smeared ash on their doorstep in the shape of a cross, that the market women won't sell to his mother anymore. "She says not to come," he says quietly, "but I had to. I wanted to see if you were still alive." You reach for him through the bars, your fingers curl around his. His hands are cold and trembling. "I am," you say. He cries, but silently, one tear at a time. Before the guards notice, he presses something into your hand, a folded scrap of cloth. Inside it, a sliver of dried bread, a tiny clover, a single thread from his mother's loom. "She says she remembers everything," he whispers, "and that she knows who you are." You nod, too choked to answer. They take him away too soon. That night you dream of your sister's kitchen, the smell of herbs and warm milk, the quiet laughter between chores. You dream of the children chasing chickens through the yard, of the dog barking at bees. You dream of belonging, something that feels more distant now than heaven. You wake up crying. Scholars still debate how deeply witch trials wounded the families left behind. Was the damage mostly economic? Lost land, stolen possessions, empty tables? Or was it social? Shunning, whispers, empty pews at church? Or was it something deeper, more permanent? A splintering of identity, a permanent stain on the soul of a family tree. You remember the widow whose son was accused 5 years ago. How she moved to the far edge of the village and stopped coming to market. How people crossed the road to avoid her. How she withered like a rootless plant. You think of the neighbour girl who brought you flowers when your husband died. The one who called you her second mother. You wonder what she thinks now, what her mother has told her. Do they say you were kind? Or do they say you were cunning? In 17th century Denmark, children of accused witches could be sentenced to beg outside church walls. Some were branded to mark them as witchkin. In England, even grandchildren could be denied marriage offers or inheritance if their lineage was tainted by witchcraft. One village tradition involved shunning benches outside homes, where families were required to sit in public shame. You wonder what people say to your sister now, whether they pity her or fear her, whether the merchant who once courted her daughter still comes calling, or if he's vanished into polite silence. The council has already seized your belongings. You're told the house is locked, the herbs burned, the chickens given to the constable's wife. They say it's evidence collection. But you know theft when you see it. They don't burn your memory, but they do erase it, bit by bit. People pretend they never knew you well, that your pies were too salty, that you always walked too fast, that you never really smiled. They rewrite the story, and your family has to live with the new version. During mass witch hunts, the collateral damage often spread like wildfire. Children orphaned by executions were sent to poorhouses. Wives of accused men were declared tainted. In some areas, simply defending an accused family member could result in arrest. In Salem, Massachusetts, several husbands were jailed after speaking in support of their wives. Peter sneaks back once more. He's thinner this time. He doesn't speak much, just holds your hand and stares. He tells you the church elders came to the house, that his schoolteacher won't let him sit in the front row, that someone called his mother witch sister in the square. Is it true? He asks suddenly. What they say? You take a deep breath. What do they say? He swallows hard. That you made the wind blow the wrong way, that your cat has a man's soul, that you spoke to a crow and it answered back. You close your eyes. None of that is true, you say, but if it were, would you be afraid of me? He doesn't answer, but he doesn't let go. You see in his face the terrible weight that has settled on your family, the whisper that they must prove their innocence by denying you, that they must draw a line in the dirt between us and her. You want to tell them not to, but you also want them to survive, and so you say nothing. Quirky detail. In early modern Germany, towns held cleansing rituals after witch trials. Entire families were required to publicly denounce their accused relatives in exchange for being allowed back into the market or church. In some cases, the names of accused witches were carved into church pews as a warning to future generations. You think of your sister standing in that church. You hope she doesn't speak your name. You hope she does. You imagine her holding Peter's hand, walking past the baker's wife who once shared your recipes, past the priest who prayed over your father's grave, past the magistrate's niece who once asked you how to stop dreams from waking her. You imagine her standing tall and saying, "She is my sister." You imagine her staying silent. Both feel like a kind of love. Both feel like a kind of loss. Historians argue whether families truly recovered after the flames died down, whether they could rebuild reputations, rekindle friendships, restore what was taken. Some say yes, that time mended even these wounds. Others say the stain never washed out. You suspect both are true. Some things grow back crooked, but they grow. You lie awake that night thinking not of your own pain, but of the echoes it leaves behind. Of Peter hunched in his mother's doorway listening to the wind. Of your sister grinding flour alone, with no one to sing beside her. Of a future in which your name is whispered, if at all, as a warning. Not witch, but wound. You always thought of the church as the safest place in the village. A place of quiet warmth in winter, of whispered prayers and shared hymns, of bread and wine and candlelight. You remember kneeling beside your sister at the altar rail, the feel of wood worn smooth by generations of hope. You remember singing in low tones while your neighbour's baby cried, the priest waving incense that smelled like distant cities. You never imagined you'd walk back through those doors in chains, but this time they lead you not through the wide wooden doors at the front but around the back, through a side passage meant for servants or sinners. You're not sure which you're meant to be today. The candles are already lit, the nave is empty but for 3 men. Father Johannes, the parish priest, Father Albrecht, his senior from the cathedral in the next town, and Bentham, always Bentham, perched to one side, arms folded, not speaking. Yet, Father Johannes is not young. You've seen the white creep into his beard over the last 10 winters. He's never looked at you the way the others do, not with suspicion, but with something harder to name. Disappointment, maybe, or sorrow. He speaks first, gesturing toward a worn bench. You sit. No stocks this time, no rope, just you, the candlelight, and 3 men with too many questions. You've lived in this village how long? Father Albrecht begins. My whole life, you say. You attend church. When I can. You remember your baptism. You nod. And your confirmation? You nod again. They already know all this. Father Albrecht presses on. Do you recite your prayers daily? I did, you say. Before the accusations, before the river, before the cell that smells of mildew and cold stone. He taps a finger against a leather-bound Bible. You were seen collecting herbs on a Sunday morning. You blink. That was last spring. I was tending the sick old martyr's chest. You skipped Mass. She couldn't breathe. He looks at you for a long time. And who made you heal her, daughter? Who gave you that authority? You almost answer, no one. My mother taught me. Her mother taught her. But you know that wouldn't help. Old knowledge has become dangerous. Father Johannes clears his throat. His voice is gentler. Tell us plainly, have you ever heard voices in the woods? You almost smile despite yourself. Birdsong, wind, once, a fox screaming. No names whispered, Albrecht asks. No strange music. No. No visits in the night. No dreams that linger past dawn. You think of all the dreams you've had. Your husband's voice calling, your mother's face smiling, the endless falling sensation when sleep turns to waking. Dreams that all humans have. But now even dreams are dangerous. No, you whisper. The Church's role in witch trials varied widely across Europe. In some regions, particularly in Catholic territories like Spain and Italy, the Inquisition actually suppressed many witch trials, viewing them as superstitious. In others, especially Germany, Scotland and parts of France, the clergy led the charge. Some priests sought power, others genuinely believed they were saving souls. Father Albrecht shifts in his chair. Do you know what this is? He holds up a thin pamphlet, ink smudged, edges curled. On the front, a crudely drawn woman in chains, a black shape at her feet, a serpent curled around her hand. It's a guide, he says, written by the Blessed Inquisitor Joseph Verin, on the signs of a witch. He lists 74. You wonder how many you've accidentally passed. Number 19, Albrecht reads. Excessive knowledge of herbs. You wait. Number 33, preference for solitude. You nod. Number 48, inconsistent church attendance. Joanne's glances at you, his jaw tight. Number 66, a sudden death in her presence. Did you not live beside the widow whose child passed last winter? I comforted her. Albrecht closes the booklet. So did others. Only one was accused. Some inquisitorial texts, like the infamous Malleus Maleficarum 1487, outline detailed signs of witchcraft, ranging from cold hands to hatred of holy water. These manuals were widely circulated and used as legal references. Ironically, many church officials rejected them as nonsense, too superstitious for doctrine. Still, local clergy often treated them as scripture. Bentham finally speaks. You've yet to confess, he says softly, which means either you are deeply bound by Satan or you are protecting someone. You meet his eyes. I'm protecting myself. Father Johann stands and begins to pace. Confession, child, is a gift. It frees the soul. Even if the body must still be judged, the soul may rise. You want me to lie, you say. We want you to name what has already been seen. You want to scream, to shout that no one has seen anything but fear and shadow. But you hold your tongue, because the only thing more dangerous than a witch is a woman who won't break. Joanne sighs. You know the fire comes next. You flinch, not at the word, at the quiet acceptance in his voice, like a priest reciting funeral rites. I was taught, he continues, that mercy lies in naming the devil. When you speak it, his power lessens. You shake your head. There's no devil here. Albrecht stands. There is. And he's in your mouth, stealing your voice. They decide to hold a mass, for you. Not to free you, but to offer the village proof. The priest announces it in the square. A cleansing ritual for the safety of the community. The message is clear. Look how far we are willing to go to save you. You're led to the front pew, roped at the wrists. The church is full. Children cling to their mothers. Elders squint at you like you're already on fire. The priest speaks of sin, of temptation, of the unseen war between flesh and spirit. You are not named. But everyone knows. In the late 1500s, public masses and exorcisms were held across Europe as both religious ceremonies and spectacles. Accused witches were sometimes brought in chains to these events to be cured or purged. Rarely did it change their fate. More often, It was part of the build-up to their sentencing. After the sermon, Albrecht approaches you before the altar. He offers you a chalice. You hesitate. He nods. Drink. You do. The wine is bitter, thicker than usual. He watches closely. Bentham leans in and whispers, "A true witch would choke." You swallow hard, then speak. "Maybe I already did." Later in your cell, you ask the young acolyte who brings your bread, "Does the priest believe I'm guilty?" He hesitates. He prays you're not. That's not an answer. He looks away. Sometimes we pray because we don't know what else to do. That night the bells toll again. You dream of fire, of stone, of silence. You've spent so many days in silence now that the voices in your mind have begun to feel like company. Some whisper memories, others replay questions you've already answered 100 times. But this morning, the silence is broken by something new. Wooden wheels creaking across the courtyard, boots in the hallway, the heavy groan of hinges not used in days. And then he returns, Bentham, but not as you've seen him before. No smug cloak or trimmed beard, no faint smile at your defiance. This time, he's dressed in black from neck to boot, plain, rigid, almost monastic, and in his hands, a wooden chest. He doesn't greet you. He nods to the guards. "Bring her." You're taken, not to the barn, not to the council hall, but to a private chamber deep under the chapel. A vaulted space. Small windows high in the wall let in thin strips of light. The air is still and smells of old parchment. Bentham places the chest on a table, opens it, and begins to take things out. Not weapons, not tools of pain, not directly. Books, bones, stones wrapped in velvet, a metal rod with 3 branches at the end, a tiny bell with no clapper, an hourglass that holds not sand, but something black and clumpy, ash maybe, a candle shaped like a human foot, a dried lizard. Many witch hunters in the 16th and 17th centuries travelled with personal kits they believed could detect signs of sorcery. These toolboxes often included pricking pins, small books of demonic names, strange relics, and pseudo-scientific devices. Some witchfinders even carried wax dolls to demonstrate the method of cursecraft to nervous villagers. Bentham watches your eyes as he lays out each item. "You know what these are?" he asks. You shake your head. They're instruments of discernment, tools of pattern, signs if you know how to read them. He lifts the forked metal rod. "This," he says, "is a diviner. It trembles near cursed objects, or people." He holds it toward you. The rod dips, slightly, but the movement is enough for him to smile. You speak before he does. "Is it drawn by warmth, breath, movement?" He narrows his eyes. "You think you're clever." "I think it's a coat hanger." His smile widens. "There's always one," he says. "The ones who don't cry, who don't beg, who want to understand the system that's crushing them." He holds up a book next. Black leather, stained edges. "A ledger," he says. "Records of past confessions. You'd be surprised how many details line up. Dreams of red eyes, the number 3, missing milk. It always begins with milk." He flips to a page, reads aloud. "She entered my house without knocking. My dog would not eat the stew after she left. That night I heard birdsong, though it was dark." He closes it. "That was a man in Yorkshire. Said his sister-in-law cursed his cows." You blink. "And what happened to her?" "She confessed. Then she burned." There's no cruelty in his voice, no relish. He's not trying to frighten you, he's trying to explain. Bentham lifts a stone, flat and polished. This came from a river in Wales. Witches there were said to throw bones into the current and read the ripples. This stone, if it sinks, means innocence. If it floats, I've seen that play before, he chuckles. Yes, but it's the meaning that matters, not the truth. He leans in now, voice lower. You want to know a secret? You nod. I don't always believe. You frown. Then why? Because belief doesn't matter. People need someone to blame. They need fear, and they need release. My job is to provide a pattern, a structure. Without it, the mob would tear everything apart. He returns the stone to its pouch. Do you know how many towns I've passed through? 73, each with its own dialect, its own saints, its own fears, but always the same signs. Bad crops, dead infants, black cats, cold winters. They call me when the list grows too long. Some witchfinders travelled under false names, changed jurisdictions, or worked only in cash. Records show that men like Matthew Hopkins, England's self-styled Witchfinder General, earned more money in a year than most farmers did in a lifetime. Hopkins even printed a book explaining how to detect witches, and charged towns to apply his methods. You watch him as he places the lizard beside the candle. What's that for? Symbol of regeneration, he says. Witches are said to heal faster, to regrow. The lizard reminds them. It unnerves them. You nod. It's all a performance. It has to be. He picks up a long feather. Turkey, he mutters. No spiritual significance, but it looks exotic. You ask, do you ever worry that you're the monster? He looks up at you. This time there is no smile. Every day, he says. You'll return to your cell with no more questioning. But something has changed. You've seen the gears behind the machine, and they're not holy or cursed. They're practical. Bentham's role isn't to uncover truth, it's to manage chaos, to turn grief into order, pain into ritual, death into something the villagers can understand. The rise of professional witchfinders coincided with periods of civil unrest, war, or famine. Where governments weakened, travelling experts filled the void. They offered certainty and were welcomed, until the burnings went too far. In some cases, the same witch hunters who led trials were later tried themselves. You learn that Bentham's pay is not in coin, but in land. The council has promised him a portion of your garden, your hens, the timber from your roof. He's not just the judge, he's the inheritor. You start to wonder how many of the people you saw burned in stories were framed for convenience, how many were silenced for their property, their stubbornness, their defiance. One night the young guard speaks. You're not the first, he says, and you won't be the last. You ask, do they always confess? He shakes his head. Some don't, but then we call Bentham, and something always turns up. You lie awake that night thinking of the rod that dips, the stone that floats, the book of repeating dreams, the woman from Yorkshire. You wonder if she was anything like you. The next morning Bentham visits again. No props this time, just a piece of parchment. It's time to write your confession, he says. We'll let you choose the names. Make it small, harmless. The fewer you name, the easier your death. You take the parchment. You hold the quill. You stare at the blankness. It waits. He waits. You think of your sister, of Peter, of the church pew, of the nettles thrown in your path, of the cold of the river, and you put down the quill. No, you say. Bentham sighs, he gathers his tools and leaves. But you notice something odd. He doesn't close the chest this time, he leaves it open. You're summoned at dawn. Not with chains, not with guards. Just a knock on the cell door. Quiet, polite. The clerk, eyes lowered, voice hushed. The council is ready, he says. You rise slowly. The aches in your joints now feel permanent. You dress yourself in silence, your fingers fumbling over laces they once tied without thought. The bruises on your wrists have darkened. Your shoulders still burn from the strain of the rope, but you don't wince, not anymore. You step outside. The morning air is still, cold. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows, late, uncertain, like it senses what the day holds and wants no part of it. They take you not to the chapel, not to the barn, not to the cellar, but to the square. Again. This time the platform has changed. No stocks, no stool, just a long table, 3 chairs behind it, and a single wooden post freshly set into the ground. You don't need to be told. This is judgment. The magistrate sits in the centre, robes darker than usual, trimmed in red. On his left, Father Ioannes holding a thick Bible. On the right, Bentham, gloved, silent. his box of tools nowhere in sight. The square is full. Everyone has come. Mothers with infants, men with arms crossed tight, children kept too close. You spot Agnes, face pale and pinched. You see your sister too, standing at the edge of the crowd, Peter beside her, clinging to her hand. You're led to the centre of the square. Verdicts in witch trials varied widely. In some regions, acquittals were possible, but rare. In others, a confession led to a quick death. Denial often meant torture or indefinite imprisonment. In Scotland, fewer than 1 in 5 accused witches survived trial. In France and parts of Italy, the rate was even lower. Historians continue to debate how much these outcomes were dictated by belief, politics, or public mood. The magistrate begins. He doesn't speak of you as a person, not of your name, your family, your life. He speaks of the accused, a figure, a concept, a problem to be solved. He lists the charges: heresy, blasphemy, unnatural acts, alliance with infernal forces, each one spoken slowly, with the gravity of ritual. Father Johannes adds scripture, verses about cleansing, about fire, about wheat and chaff. Bentham speaks last. He doesn't raise his voice, he doesn't smile. I have examined the signs, he says. The evidence speaks plainly. The accused has resisted confession, rejected holy counsel, and met every test with stubbornness. He pauses, looks out at the crowd. We cannot prove innocence, but we have seen enough to be sure of danger. You step forward. Only once. I am not what you say. The magistrate doesn't respond. He unrolls a scroll. He reads the sentence. You will be burned tomorrow at dawn. The words fall like stones. No pause, no discussion, no gesture of final mercy. Just, this is what will happen. In certain parts of Bavaria, the condemned were given red cloaks to wear on their final night, a sign of final repentance. In others, they were offered sweetened wine and soft bread, a strange kindness. In some French towns, those sentenced to burn could pay to be strangled before the fire was lit, a privilege extended only to those who cooperated. You don't cry. You feel the weight of the words settle across your shoulders, but no new pain comes. It's simply the final step in a long, slow death that began with a whisper. You're returned to your cell. This time no guards watch the door. Just the priest sitting beside the iron bars, murmuring prayers you can barely hear. I can still offer last rites, he says. You ask, would they do me any good? He pauses. They might help the soul rest. And what if the soul isn't finished yet? He has no answer for that. That night they give you wine, not rich, not sweet, but wine nonetheless. You sip it slowly. They give you bread too, it's stale, but it's food. You think of your sister, of Peter, of the lives still going on beyond your cell. You wonder if your death will truly free them, or if it will follow them like a shadow. Years from now, when someone sneezes wrong or plants mint too close to the church wall, you wonder if your name will be remembered, or erased. Many records of witch trials are incomplete, and countless names have been lost to time. In some areas, local clerks refused to write down the names of those executed, believing they were unworthy of memory. In others, family names were quietly changed to avoid the stigma. Some descendants today still carry the burden of those erased names, ghosts in their family trees. Bentham visits you once more, late, alone. He carries no books, only a stool. He sits beside your door. Tomorrow, he says, the world will go on. The markets will open, the rain will come. You nod. He watches you for a long time. I don't hate you, he says. Good, you answer, because I don't think I ever believed you hated me. I think you hated the gap between what the village needed and what you could prove. He exhales. You understand more than most. That's not a compliment, you say. It's a curse. He rises. Do you want to say anything before the end? You shake your head. I said everything already. No one listened. He leaves the door unlocked, but you don't run. Where would you go? And even if you could disappear into the hills, would you ever stop looking over your shoulder? Would you ever forgive yourself if your sister were punished in your place? Number. You stay, not because you agree, but because running wouldn't make you free. The sky outside turns a pale blue. Morning, your final morning, and the bells begin to toll, and not for you, but for the crowd, or for the show. Execution by fire was not always as dramatic as stories suggest. In many cases, victims were tied to a stake, and the fire was set at their feet, meant to suffocate before burning. In other cases, the fire was intentionally built slowly so the village could watch longer. Spectacle, not mercy, often dictated how flames were managed. They lead you to the post in silence. You're offered a blindfold. You refuse it. You want to see. The magistrate recites a final prayer. The crowd is still, not cheering, not shouting, just waiting, and you search the faces, and you find them. Your sister, Peter. Neither hides. She doesn't scream, she doesn't run forward, but she nods, once, and you nod back. The ropes tighten around your ankles, your waist, your wrists. You're not gagged. Your voice is still yours. The priest offers a final blessing. You whisper your own instead, not to God, not to the village, but to yourself. I remember who I am. The torch touches the kindling, and the smoke begins to rise. You would think the final hours would feel like a rush, like the breath before a fall, the sprint before a crash, but they don't. They move slowly, not in kindness, but in cruelty. You're untied from the post. Yes, untied. The fire is not lit yet. It was never meant to burn so early. That would rob the town of its full moment. Execution is not just punishment. It's a ritual, a rhythm, a demonstration. And so, for now, the flames wait. The priest tells you this part is called the procession of peace. You almost laugh. They walk you, barefoot and bound, through the town, slowly, deliberately, from the chapel steps to the square, then to the edge of the orchard, where the first frost of the season has dusted the grass like a ghost's breath. The crowd follows at a distance. Some murmur prayers, others toss petals, wilted, browning at the edges, gathered from graveyards. A child stares at you, clutching a doll made of corn husk and string. You nod at her. She hides behind her mother's skirt. In certain villages across Europe, the final hours before an execution were choreographed to allow the condemned to walk their sins clean. The route past landmarks, wells, graveyards, gardens, symbolic places tied to both life and death. Clerics and villagers joined the march, turning justice into pageant. They give you time to sit beneath the old yew tree. They even unbind your wrists. A bench has been placed there facing east. You sit, you stare at the horizon. You wonder if the sun feels different when it's your last. It doesn't. Bentham appears silent as a shadow and stands nearby, not watching you, watching the villagers. He's not dressed in black today. He wears soft grey. He doesn't speak. You ask him, why the ritual? He doesn't look at you. So no one has to feel guilty. If they walk beside you, throw a flower, whisper a prayer, they believe they've done enough. It absolves them. You nod. And you? I absolve nothing, he says. I record. You turn to face him. Are you proud? No, he says. But I'm thorough. He walks away, and you're alone again. The priest kneels beside you later, holding a book, murmuring verses you don't need and don't want. He offers you confession. You decline. He offers it again. You decline again. He sighs, closes the book. Then he asks something different. Would you like to write a letter? You blink. To whom? Anyone. You think of your sister, but you know the guards would never let it reach her. And if it did, it would follow her like a curse. So instead you ask for paper and write nothing. Just hold the quill, just feel it between your fingers. Just remember what it was like to write something down without consequence. They let you eat. Bread. Salt. A soft pear. It tastes like memory. You chew slowly, every bite a kind of grief. You remember the last meal you shared with friends. Laughter, honey, herbs, a fire burning low in the corner. You wonder where they are now. You wonder if they remember. In a handful of towns across the Alps, the condemned were offered a ceremonial Last Supper with their accusers, called the Parting Table. The idea was to reconcile the living and the dying. Most of the time the meal was quiet, awkward, unbearable. Sometimes it ended in shouting. In rare cases, people changed their minds. No one offers you such a table, but you imagine it anyway. You imagine sitting across from Agnes. You imagine reaching across the wooden boards and placing your hands over hers. You imagine saying, "You were afraid, I understand." And you imagine her whispering, "I didn't mean it to go this far." You imagine that, but only that, because it doesn't happen. Instead, you are given a candle. A small white taper, barely thicker than your thumb. You're told to carry it back to the square, the final part of the ritual. You walk slowly. The crowd has gathered again. The platform now has flowers at its base. Dried heather, marigold, sprigs of rosemary. Your feet are blistered. You don't care. You carry the candle like it means something. You place it at the foot of the stake. Then they tie you again. This time tighter. They do not gag you. The magistrate stands before the crowd, unrolling the sentence a second time, because performance is power. The villagers nod. The priest offers one final call to repentance. And that's when it happens. A cry from the crowd. Not a protest, not a plea, but a clap. One single clap, then another, then silence, then a voice. Wait. You blink. The crowd parts. And there stands a man. Older than you, wrapped in traveller's robes, beard frosted white, eyes pale with knowledge or blindness, you're not sure which. He speaks again. I come with a letter. A murmur. He holds it up, unfolds it, reads aloud. It's from a bishop 2 towns over. He has questions, he has doubts. He calls for pause. The magistrate hesitates. Bentham doesn't. No, he says. The rite has begun. Joanne steps forward. But if it's real... Bentham turns to him. Then it's late. The traveller hands the letter to the clerk and walks away. No name, no explanation. Just a message left in the wind. There are a few recorded cases, precious few, of executions halted at the last moment due to sudden letters, messengers, or orders from higher clerical authorities. In most cases the stay was temporary, delays, not reprieves. The momentum rarely stopped once a sentence had been declared, but these cases remain debated. Were they acts of mercy, or simply administrative chaos? Your ropes are not cut, but the torch is not lit. The magistrate turns to Bentham, and Bentham nods, once, then leaves the platform. Later, in the confusion, you're untied. No announcement, no apology. You're taken not back to your cell, but to a cart. Covered, no one speaks. You're driven out of town under cover of fog. No guards, just a driver who doesn't meet your eye. He drops you at the fork in the road, hands you a bag, bread, water, cloak, points toward the woods, and leaves, just like that. No fanfare, no farewell, no home. Just silence. You walk for hours, no destination, no map. Only freedom, awkward, weightless, strange. You sleep beneath trees, bathe in streams, speak to no one. Days pass, maybe weeks. And then, in a different town, under a different name, you begin again. Very quietly, selling herbs, boiling teas, watching your words. You never stay long, because one glance, one whisper, one wrong kindness could start it all over again. You become a story, a myth, a shadow that once almost burned, a name erased and remembered only in pieces. And far away, in a village that no longer speaks your name, the square remains. The post stands, and every spring someone ties a ribbon around it. No one says why, but they do every year. You live, but you don't return. You don't write your sister. You don't send word to Peter. You leave behind the name you carried since birth, burying it under pine needles and ash, under frostbitten soil and fading memory. But even as your body survives, your name does not. That part of you dies exactly where it was meant to. At the foot of the unlit stake, in the smoke that never rose, in the silent hush of the crowd that watched you disappear. You become a rumour. At first it's whispered. She wasn't burned, you know. The bishop sent a letter. No, she escaped. Rode off with the priest in the night. Someone said she turned into a raven, flew right over the square. Your shadow does more wandering than you do. In one village it cures sheep. In another it curses butter. A boy claims he saw you by the river, hair down, hands glowing. A woman says your ghost whispered her unborn baby's name. Eventually people stop wondering where you went. They start wondering what you were. In the years following peak witch hunting periods, stories of the accused often evolved into folklore. Some were demonized further, twisted into cautionary tales. Others were romanticized into wise women, nature spirits, or tragic figures. These dual legacies, villain and martyr, persisted for centuries, complicating how history remembers real people. Back in your home village, life goes on. The seasons change. Crops are sown, harvested and buried again. Children who once watched you from behind their mother's skirts grow tall and forget your face. The stake is repurposed, first as firewood, then a fence post, then a signpost marking the edge of the commons. But still your name lingers. No one says it aloud, but they remember. It becomes a test. Don't pick herbs after dusk, you don't want to end up like her. Stay quiet in church, remember the witch. Over time, the witch stops meaning you. It starts meaning any woman who stares too long, any girl who learns too fast, any widow who keeps her own land. You've become a template, a shorthand for fear wrapped in womanhood. One spring years later, a young girl with braids and bare feet finds a rusted pin in the grass where the old platform once stood. She picks it up, tucks it into her apron, and whispers a name she doesn't understand. That night her grandmother scolds her. Throw that away, you don't know where it's been. But the girl keeps it, because something about it feels like power. In parts of the Scottish Highlands, witch stones were rumoured to be the buried relics of executed women. Small items said to carry residual magic. Children would dig near gallows sites, hoping to find buttons, pins or rings. Over time, these objects were treated as good luck charms, then feared as cursed artifacts, then forgotten altogether. You age slowly, in secret. You learn to laugh again, but quieter. You fall in love again, but never say it aloud. You help others when you can, always watching the door. You change your name with the seasons. Sometimes you're a widow, sometimes a healer, sometimes a mute. You tell no one what happened, but in quiet hours, you dream of the square, of your sister, of Peter, of the magistrate who couldn't meet your eyes, and of Bentham, who never came to find you. Historians still argue about what stories mean, about where facts end and legends begin, about how a woman can be erased, rewritten, resurrected, without ever leaving a grave. You don't need a tombstone to be mourned. You don't need a fire to be feared. You become something else entirely. Somewhere in a dusty church archive, a young scholar finds a half-burned document, a confession unsigned. The ink is faded, the paper torn, but the last line is still legible. I remember who I am. She copies the phrase. She writes a paper and she gives a lecture. The audience stirs. A debate starts. Was the accused a witch? Or just a woman? Did the bishop save her? Or was it a myth? Did she ever really exist? You smile, wherever you are. Because in the end, the worst thing they could have done was forget you. And they didn't. You're still here, in petals thrown during spring processions, in candle wax smeared on old stones, in bedtime stories whispered by grandmothers who swear it's just a tale, but still glance at the shadows when the fire gets low. You're still here. Not as a witch, not as a ghost, but as a memory that refuses to behave. And memory is more dangerous than any curse, because it never burns the way they want it to. And now, the fire fades. The square empties. The whispers drift into wind. You're no longer bound, no longer cold, no longer silenced. You walk a quiet path now, through forests, over mossy stones, beside rivers that no longer judge you. The pain of the past dulls with each step. until it becomes something softer, a lesson maybe, a scar that no longer aches when touched. The villagers sleep again beneath that same sky. Some still whisper your name, some pretend they've forgotten. But you are free, in a way they never understood. No one watches, no one follows, just stars above and roots below. The earth remembers you even when they do not. The wind carries your breath to other girls. Quiet girls, brave girls, girls who ask questions when told not to. They may not know your story, but they feel your footsteps behind them, guiding, warning, whispering. They know not to trust the fire, not to bow too deeply, and not to apologize for surviving. So breathe slowly now. Let your jaw unclench. Let the air come in like water. You're safe. You're here. You're more than the name they gave you. You're a shadow of truth, stubborn and soft, and they cannot burn what they cannot catch. Sleep well, brave one. You made it through the flames and beyond. Sweet dreams.